do this.
All right. I think we're live. Welcome, everyone, to a brand new show, new concept. Carl and I are going to react to various tweets, various viral posts, and just kind of chat about it and hopefully interact with the audience as well. How you doing this morning, Carl?
Good. How are you, sir? Long time no see.
I am pretty good. Yeah, it's been a while. So we've queued up some stuff we've been talking about doing this for a while, and we've queued up some stuff that we wanted to talk about. I've sent some stuff into our chat. You've sent some stuff, and I've loaded it up here in our account. Fingers crossed everything will work here. Okay, yeah, we've got them. And I think I've seen everything you've sent. You've seen everything I've sent, so
yeah,
we had a chance to think about it. But hold on, I've got this on the background. We've already got a comment. Man, Carl has the best shirts. And,
thanks to my wife. My wife dressed me.
Yeah. When I went to Malaysia, I was in a shop and I saw a shirt and I was like, that is such a Carl shirt. And they've got my size. So I got one. I haven't really had the balls to wear it out. So I got to wait till we're together. And I've got somebody else who really rocks it well. And then I'm going to,
You could have done it today, we'll be twinsies.
Oh, we got to do that next time. Yeah. All right, let's just jump right into this. So let's see what we've got for our first tweet. All right, Henry Gao says, for those who kept saying that the CCP has lifted 800 million people out of poverty, have you ever wondered who put them there in the first place? I'm sure he thought he was doing something with this. I'm sure he thought it made sense. What's your initial reaction to that? That's my tweet I lined up, but you go ahead.
I mean, this is like that Falun Gong show, life before communism, right? Like the idea that before communism, China is this like paradise, utopia, right? I mean, but for people who study a little bit of history, you would know that's far from the truth. There were famines, foreign invasions, civil war. In fact, famine was regular occurrence before 1949. Like all throughout China, there were the unrecorded famine that we know that was reported by Western media. There were famine in 1942, which was reported by American reporter Theodore White, who worked for the Time magazine. His reporting on the Henan famine in 1942 actually almost got him fired because Chiang Kai-shek's wife, Song Meining, at the time, she wielded a lot of influence. She went directly to Theodore's employer, the guy who owns the Time magazine, tried to get Theodore fired for just exposure, shedding light on the 1942 famine. And then there was another famine in 1946. Again, these because there were a lot of Americans reporters in China at that time, both before, during, and after World War II. So these are just a famine that we know of, and there were like photographic evidence, and that was the reality of China. And another thing is literacy. Literacy rate was about, like was like 10 to 15%. Like 90% of the people in China were illiterate before 1949.
Yeah,
so to think that
yeah. Go ahead. I think we got a bit of a delay, so you go ahead.
Okay.
Are you frozen there?
Oh yeah, I think it's probably my internet.
Okay.
Maybe I should just take a break and let you go.
Yeah, no problem.
Perfect time.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I don't know how anybody wouldn't be able to, or who could look at what China came from and where they are now, like the level of status they have in the world, the level of wealth, and not think this is nothing short of an absolute miracle. There's a chart that was shared by one of our friends on Twitter here too. This is the life expectancy right? Like, where does this happen? Hundreds of millions of people lifted out of extreme poverty. Like the question, I'm sure when he typed it out, he really thought he was doing something, but he definitely didn't think it through and doesn't have a grasp on Chinese history, even though this seems to be what he's selling as his specialty. But yeah, no. Let's go on to the next one. We've got a bunch of stuff lined up here. Well, let's take a quick look at the comments. We can look at the comments in between, because I find when we do these live streams, especially when it's a big group of people, when we do like 4 people, we never really get to the comments that much. So let's see here. Let's pull some of them up. If you want to comment on any of these two, prior to European colonialism in the 1800s, China was in turn together with India, world's #1 and 2 economies for 2,000 years. If you want to comment on any of these as I bring them up, just,
well, yeah, I mean, it's true. It's true that, China was the world's largest economy before, especially before the Industrial Revolution happened in England. But one of the reasons for that is because before Industrial Revolution, most of the economy is basically agriculture. So it's measured like if you have more people, you have like the larger the size of the economy. And China, in 1840, at the time of okay, my internet is really bad, but in 1840s, at the time of First Opium War, Chinese population is about 40% of the world's total population. So of course, China was the world's largest economy back then. But in terms of GDP per capita at that time in 1840, China was already falling behind, and mostly because England was already able to finish the first round of Industrial Revolution by 1840. This is one of the reasons, China was defeated in the Opium War, because now it was basically a agrarian country pitting against the first industrialized nation on Earth. So there was a huge technological gap. But yeah, that's just my little 2 cents.
Yeah, for sure. This is a really good point too. That the CPC has restored sovereignty to China, and that's important too, because the way that they've developed also is in their own way and without reliance on the Western systems, at least as much as possible, in terms of the financial systems, in terms of the social media networks. They've created their own systems. When you have a situation where Europe is all of a sudden saying, wow, maybe we need to diversify a bit, they are so entrenched with US technology, infrastructure, finance, security, everything, that it's almost impossible. But China has done this in such a way without those vulnerabilities. So let's
and China has done it without practicing colonialism and imperialism. The Europe's rise in the last 500 years, a lot of that derived from the capital accumulation from colonialism that enabled England, for example, to leap forward with the Industrial Revolution. But China's rise, it was mostly peaceful in the modern times. It was peaceful, and it was done without colonial expansion or practicing imperialism among its neighbors.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because somebody asked me, it was offline, and somebody had said to me, they said, imagine if America had just chosen a different way where they cooperate with China in this new multipolar world, and they work together, for the betterment of the world. I said, that's going to be kind of hard, because, China actually produces something. China actually has an economy that isn't relied on the exploitation of the rest of the world. The US and their wealth is still largely designed around the exploitation and subjugation of the rest of the world, including their own allies, in terms of what they can and can't do. And when they say jump, they say how high. That's something that doesn't really happen here. And that's why they couldn't coexist like that. How are they going to coexist with China when that is what their wealth is based upon? If they coexist with China in such a way where they say, okay, we'll play this game together, and we'll kind of take the same approach of, like I said, the betterment of the world. That's not really how it actually works when you look at it. I'll bring up the next one so we can continue on. So we have this Denise Wu, also very anti-China online activist. I feel sorry for the Chinese engineers who realize their intellectual property belongs to the state, not them, after the Manus order. So this was in regards to the story of the Facebook deal getting blocked. I'll put this is one of the stories I put forward, and I replied to her. Ended up ratioing her quite a bit. Said, why feel sorry for the Chinese? Because I knew that this stuff happens all the time in foreign countries. So if we look at those specific examples, if I zoom in on them, Qualcomm was blocked from being sold to a Singapore-based company. There's another U.S. private company that was going to be sold to China. Same thing, blocked. U.S. being sold to a Japanese company, blocked. And the list goes on and on and on here. And these are just only some of the examples. Like, this is just something that happens all the time. So that's why I said, well, why do you only feel sorry for the Chinese? Same thing. I think she thought she was doing something there, but it doesn't make sense. Like, if that's the standard, well, then everybody has that problem everywhere. I don't know if you have something to add into that.
Yeah, and there's some context about that story too. So Manus is an AI company that was formed in China. Their data, their AI was trained on Chinese, and it was produced by Chinese AI engineers. So what the AI, the Manus founder, what they try to do is they try to incorporate their company in Singapore. And then so they can claim they're not a Chinese company, they're not answerable to the Chinese government. And in order to facilitate the deal with Facebook, they actually fired their Beijing employees, several hundreds of people. So the Chinese government said, no, you can't do that. You can't just take the intellectual property that you build by training on Chinese user data, by using Chinese AI engineers, and then go ahead and sell to Facebook for, like, I forgot what was the deal, like hundreds of billions of dollars or something, and then fire all the Chinese AI engineers inside China, just to profit for yourself. You're not allowed to do that. I mean, I think that's a perfectly legitimate reason for the Chinese government.
Yeah, if you think about it too, there is an ecosystem here, including subsidies, grants, all kinds of things to encourage this industry. So if you take advantage of government and public funds in order to grow this company, and then sell it so that you can privately profit from it, that is something that happens over and over and over again in the US, whether it be, the technology behind the internet invented for the military and then commercialized and privatized so that AOL can, profit from it privately. What is it they say? That they have, in America, they have socialized development, but privatized profits. And so that is kind of ridiculous. And people, even in the US, look at that and say, wow, this is kind of, not right. But China is putting a stop to that. And you know what? There's a comment here. It's just one word, TikTok, and from Dinko Kumar. And that's a good point too, because if you talk about Chinese companies building something and owning it, well, how about when the US forces you to sell a big portion of it? Shouldn't you feel sorry for Chinese developers at that point when they were forced to sell part of their company to the US, even though they didn't want to? So that's kind of hypocritical of somebody to pretend to feel sorry for the corporate owners of Manus. Let's see what else we got here for comments before we move on to the next one. Video of DeepSeek. Okay. Let's see here. Banners, no, media assets. Here we go. So we will move on to the next one. So it looks like these uploads worked, but they're all over the place. So I have to find them. Let's see what we got here. Okay, yeah. This is one that you picked up on also. A pro AI dark money group backed by a powerful super PAC funded by execs tied to Palantir and OpenAI has been secretly paying influencers to push pro-AI, anti-China propaganda on TikTok and Instagram. When I sent this to you in our chat, you had highlighted the specifics here. Sample messaging provided by Build American AI to content creators include lines like, I just learned that China's trying really hard to beat the US in AI. If they do, it could mean that China gets personal data from me and my kids and take jobs that should be here in USA and in the AI innovation race. I'm Team USA. Like, first of all, how artificial does that sound? But you want to expand on that?
Yeah, they were paying. Apparently, they were paying $5,000 per TikTok segment. This again, Palantir. This is an AI company, United States, that's deeply embedded in with the U.S. military that was used during the Israeli genocide in Gaza, and they also constructed massive surveillance states inside United States. For the Palantir and the tech bro in the Silicon Valley, they're one of the leading. They're like one of the leading anti-China voices inside the United States, and one reason is they're afraid of competition. They're afraid that the Chinese AI is making their business model obsolete because right now there's a huge AI bubble building in United States. There's some estimate if you take away all the AI investment that went into build data centers, then the U.S. economy essentially had no growth in over the last year, and all these investment into this AI bubble actually doesn't justify, given all these. So far, they have generated very little revenue. Now, like the amount of revenue those AI have so far generated does not justify the gargantuan investment that went in. But the idea was they're trying to grab the market share. They're trying to gain a monopoly. So what allows them to collect a toll in the very near future, where like people depend everything on AI, and then every time you use ChatGPT, for example, you have to pay them. That's a whole idea. But what happened was, you have Chinese AI companies like DeepSeek that was giving out stuff for free. I mean, like the whole open source model that was backed by China destroyed the Western proprietary AI business model. Like now all these Sam Altman of OpenAI looks silly when he goes around asks for like $500 billion for his Stargate project, when here you have a DeepSeek that was developed for less than the amount of money that cost Sam Altman his own car. So like suddenly they look ridiculous, and it destroys their whole plan for a tech monopoly. This is why they're dead set against Chinese AI development. This is why they're also the main backer of the United States chip sanction against China. The whole idea behind the chip sanction is to destroy China's AI or destroy China's AI development, so you will not surpass the United States.
Yeah, I wonder almost if it's because it's a consumer-facing product, in a lot of cases, that they have to be a little bit more delicate about how they do this propaganda, and that's why they actually have to pay to get influencers out there. And I'll contrast that to something else. You've had multiple examples of industries where, for example, the aluminum industry says that, okay, China is beating us. We've got to figure out how to block them from our markets. And so they lobby the government for months and months and months. And then about a year later, you see something come out saying that we have sanctioned Chinese aluminum because we have found it contains forced labor, without any actual evidence. And they've done that for other industries also. So they have a more direct pipeline to be able to crush industries like that. Like the ordinary consumer is not going to be like, oh no, I can't buy raw aluminum from China anymore. But when it comes to stuff like this, and especially because people are becoming a little bit more aware, they actually have to spend not just on the lobbying side towards the government, but to shape public opinion. I mean, that's happened for a long time anyways. This has been a thing that's gone on for ages and ages and ages. But Nothing new. Yeah, while I'm
Yeah,
pulling
and
this up and looking at
they're
some
going
comments, go
after
ahead.
Labubu now.
Yeah, that's right.
They're
Yeah.
going after Labubu now. Like, cause recently I saw like the U.S. Congress, the U.S. Congress, the Selected Committee on CCP influence or whatever. They are retweeting a article that claiming, okay, yeah, you thought also Labubu were cute and fluffy, but did you know it contains the Xinjiang cotton? You know where Xinjiang cotton come from? It comes from Uyghur slave labor. Like everything is somehow justified, by these baseless, bogus claim. Like Labubu is dangerous because it's produced by Uyghur slave labor. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, they that's their go-to claim for vast sanctions. And they don't actually have anything to back it up. There was one time where they accused a company that made wigs from synthetic hair. And it was like, I can't remember how many tons of artificial hair that was shipped to the US. And it was seized by the US Border Control. Yeah. And they said that, oh, this contains Uyghur hair. And if you looked at the amount of shipments out from this, like you looked at the weigh bills out from this factory and how many tons of hair that they're shipping, and you look at the population of Uyghurs and then you divide it by half, you would not be able to find a Uyghur woman with hair anymore if they were harvesting their product from the hair of Uyghur women. And on an interview with, excuse me, I think it was Radio Free Asia or Voice of America, somebody from the U.S. government said that they were going to put it through DNA testing to confirm that it actually came from Uyghur women. And I was like, this is going to be funny because it's obviously going to come back as false. Like, there's no way. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The result was that they never released anything. They probably tested it and are like, oh, crap, it is artificial hair. So if they had released that, it would undermine not only that propaganda effort, but anything else that they would say in the future because they made such a big deal about it. So it would be better for them just to not say anything at all and just pretend that didn't happen and hope people forget about it. But I had been waiting for that. I had been waiting for that report. All right, let's see if we got any comments here. We can move on to the next one. So Denise, so that was that one. 8, 9. Oh, you're gonna have fun with this one. So we had a post from Mehmet Toti. China's government has set up alcohol drinking training centers for Uyghurs, especially for those who are 70 or older, to push them I think it means to intoxicate themselves in Korla City in East Turkestan. And then, so this guy puts out a lot of crazy crap to begin with. He's from the overseas Uyghur community, and it's not a surprise. But then you get people who are trying to present themselves as actual academics who want to be taken seriously in serious circles, who then go on to post it also and say drinking alcohol training base in the video. Training was a term used for the internment camps, and so like he's really believing in this. And then you had let's see, I'll let you chime in on this in a second.
Yeah, for people who are not familiar with Jim Millward, he's actually a Chinese historian who works at Georgetown School of Foreign Service. I mean, basically, he's working at the CIA finishing school, right? Like a lot of the Georgetown graduate for the School of Foreign Service went straight into the CIA pipeline, and he's one of these academics that lent the kind of veneer of respectability to the whole Uyghur genocide narrative. And now he's a China expert. Now here he's saying, he's confirming that what the Uyghur diaspora was saying. And except this whole thing about alcohol training center is in Chinese internet meme. For people who lived in China or just like active on Chinese social media knew this was a meme. It was a joke about referring to ordinary restaurant, right? Instead of calling it a restaurant, they call it the alcohol training center. But Jim Millward, who hasn't been in China for decades, who obviously also apparently does not participate on Chinese social media, does not understand it. He does not understand the meme. So he is imparting some dark, sinister, like meaning behind those words. But he just exposed his total ignorance of the Chinese pop culture. I mean, if anything, and a lot of people, both Chinese people and foreigners who live in China, replied to him, pointing out to him his mistake. But he just doubled down on it. He just
we'll get to his double down. We'll get to his double down in a second, because before we get to that, we'll get Beth.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We'll get Bethany in on it too, because for him, at least, for a long time, we've seen his content, and that it's full of BS, but he comes across as like somebody who would be able to convince ordinary people. Now, Bethany is also one of these, kind of, anti-China activists. She's slightly more unhinged. She doesn't come across as much as a normal person. Like when Trump was elected, she said, I had a dream that when Trump got elected, my long blonde hair grew down to the floor, and I used it to cover the body of my brown husband and protect him. Like, normal people they probably don't have that dream to begin with, but if you do, you don't go out and just post something unhinged like that. But nonetheless, maybe a slightly lower grade of people who believe in anti-China propaganda would believe her. And she really went into this deep analysis about, and they really actually believe what's being said. But James, because he has to pretend to be a normal person who honestly engages with the content, he couldn't ignore the fact that everybody was ratioing him, telling him, dude, it's just a joke. And so desperately to try to save himself, he changed the tone a little bit, but still at the end of the day, doubled down. Critical comments suggest that this establishment is a bar restaurant. That's even more interesting, though dark at such a place would ironically evoke the camps and the idea of a base as a restaurant name while selling Uyghur celebration pilaf, if I pronounce that right, Uyghur celebration food. Like, he couldn't bring himself to say, all right, I got caught by a meme. He's like, oh no, this is still so dark. Never mind the fact that if you go to these places, if you go to, Kashgar or Hotan, and you go to these nightclubs and these bars, it's filled with Uyghur people. Like, it's Uyghur people. Like, Uyghur people have thousands of years of a drinking culture. They make their own wine. They have their own special wine that they make from grapes. Like, just because they're Muslim, it doesn't mean that they strictly follow the same interpretation of Islam that other places do. And that was part of the problem when extremism was coming in, because there were people who were trying to force other Uyghurs to follow a more strict interpretation of Islam. But Uyghurs drink. That's the fact of the matter. Hardly any eat pork. They follow that portion of it. But drinking is something that they love to do, and they've done it for a long time. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, actually, I remember maybe listening to podcast Seneca by Kaiser Guo. He interviewed one Chinese American who works in those like NED circles that went in to cover the Xinjiang issue, and she said she was shocked when she first come into contact with Uyghurs in China, because she grew up as like an expat in Middle East. Like, her parents work in the Gulf region, so she had expected. Because she thought, okay, because if they're Muslim, they must wear like fully covered up and all that. So she was shocked in China. She find these people are not practicing the same brand of Islam that was practiced in places like Saudi Arabia or But I'm actually surprised, because if she lived in places like Dubai, she would also know, like, it's not like, it's, but anyway, but she claims she was like really shocked at how they Uyghurs in Xinjiang didn't stick to what she considered Islam. And I just thought, this is so American. This just is like like a typical American thinking, right? Like the Americans are so parochial. They, in their idea, the real true Islam is, you know, you got to be wrapped up in a burqa and you know, only show your eyes or something like that. It's just, you know, it shows, it really shows more about her own ignorance than anything else. But anyway, that's just what I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, yeah, people have this image of them being this really traditional people, and where, you know, and it's almost like the West wants them to stay like how they always were before, even though every single society moves on also. Like, I remember when they were renovating the old city to bring running water into the old city. Like previously in those old cities, like the kids would bathe outside with buckets. Now they have plumbing and everything. Even that was like, oh wow, look what they're doing to these areas. Or what's that other guy, that semi-famous guy who took an issue with the teeth brushing campaign from the hygiene department? He's like, oh, this is a form of colonialization. Do you remember who that was? What's his name?
Timothy Groth. Timothy Groth or something. Yeah.
But you know, the place is modernizing while keeping a lot of the traditional elements. But there's such a modern people. I remember when I was in Xinjiang a couple years ago, I was in the Sunday Bazaar, and I met this kid who showed me all around the market. And he just came across as this like really cool kid, really cared about his family, and he's the same age as my eldest son. So I stayed in contact with him. When I got back to Chongqing, I sent him a skateboard because he's really into sports and stuff like that. So I bought a skateboard and sent it to him. And then we were back in Xinjiang 2 weeks ago, and I met up with him with my family. So he got to meet my son. I met some of his family, and I took them to dinner. But when I first met up with him, I was just going to give him a friendly handshake, and he dapped me up. He's doing the whole thing. He's like, "Hey, what's up?" You know, and I'm like, "Oh," you know, just really, just probably not like people would imagine. Yeah. Let's see here. So we have, where were we? So the last one was the Alcohol Training Center. I got to figure out a better way to organize this later.
Yeah. While you're looking for that, I'll tell my own anecdotal stories about my travel to Xinjiang just last year. You know, like, you know, I went around the city of Kashgar during the National Day holiday. I just decided to film like a 30 minutes video of my walking through the street without me adding any commentary. Just by showing all these Uyghur people out in the street going about daily life, that itself blew the whole genocide narrative out of the water. And then I also remember, you know, one of my fellow traveler, a South African guy, we were at the cafe in Kucha, and he's like, "Carl, did you see that?" I'm like, "What?" He said, "Dude, that barista, the Uyghur barista, dude, he's like flaming." I was like, "Oh yeah," and I noticed, and then I thought about it, you know, like the very presence of that flaming Uyghur barista, and also his coworker, who is a Uyghur woman. She is dressed in like, not, you know, like she's just covered up, like she wear long sleeve and stuff, but like, she's wearing like form hugging clothing. And I told him, like, just few years ago, maybe like 10 years back, you would probably not see people like that so openly on the street, because the problem that was prevalent in Xinjiang, like what you mentioned, they're extremists who force people to dress certain way and to behave certain way. You would not have like 10 years ago, you definitely would not have a openly flaming a gay barista like out in the open, you know, serving coffee in a touristy town. That just would not happen.
You know, I have a lot of local friends in Kashgar, and one of them told me that the people who are most thankful to the amount of effort and attention that China put towards solving that extremism issue are the women, because they were the ones who were, when their husbands or the fathers, whatever it is, were convinced that they needed to adopt this more extreme interpretation of Islam, they were the ones who were feeling the brunt of it. Not allowed to go out anymore, not allowed to go to university, couldn't consume outside media, just had to, read these texts that they had, basically trying to take like a kind of Taliban-ish interpretation of Islam and force it upon them. So, I mean, they are the ones who are the most thankful for that. But across the board, like whether it was, somebody drinking, they'd have to be more careful about it during that time. Again, even though once again, they have thousands of years of drinking culture and history. During that time, there were people who were looking out for you and wanted to target you for not following that strict interpretation. And, it's ironic because, everybody everybody who got on board with, we got to do something for the women of Afghanistan, the solution was to bomb the shit out of them. That was the solution. And it's like, yeah, but we got to free the women. And the result of that was that innocent people lost their lives while they were pretending to care about the women of Afghanistan. When a similar kind of extremism was creeping in that was pushing women in China toward that same direction, they had these education, vocational training centers. Even if you want to say that there were a percentage of people that got sent to there who had to go to mandatory training, which you could, by the way, you were leaving on the weekends. Even BBC, when they were trying to spin it as something really negative, you could see that it was pretty much a school. Okay, they probably had to go there. They went home on the weekends. If you consider that there were a certain percentage of people that were told you have to go to this who didn't deserve to go to that, that's a reasonable conclusion that probably happened in some cases. The result of China's approach was that innocent people might have got trained. They might have got training, vocational training. The result of America's approach to terrorism in an area that they don't even have jurisdiction over was that you will lose your life completely, or your family members will lose your life. So it's really ironic when you look at that and you actually take a look at what they were fighting and what was going on.
And now they're kind of pivoting away from like genocide to cultural genocide because they know it's kind of ridiculous, especially if you juxtapose what's happening in Gaza today. They're trying to say, it's a cultural genocide. Now they're teaching school kids, Uyghur kids, Mandarin in school, trying to wipe out their linguistic identity. I mean, that's bullshit because I was in Xinjiang. All the locals speak Uyghur. I just pick one couple of phrases. I just go around and say, Jakshimu says, which is the standard greeting in Uyghur. Everybody just light up, like their facial expressions just change. They just break out in smiles, like, Uyghur, and then we have a conversation. And everybody spoke Uyghur, like even little kids. But the difference is, though, I did notice there's a generation gap in kind of the Mandarin skills. Like usually people 50 and years and older, a lot of them don't speak standard Mandarin. Like, but the people start from like in the 30s and 40s, they could speak Mandarin, we could communicate, but you can't, sometimes there's still a little bit, still, like they don't speak that fluently. And I did notice among younger children, like, they're perfectly bilingual because there was a time I was traveling with Pepe Escobar, the Brazilian journalist. He wanted to trim his beard, so we walked into a Uyghur barber shop in Khotan in the middle of the night, and so the two barbers were like Uyghurs in their late 20s. So we strike a conversation with. There's still sometimes some words they couldn't communicate, but they have a kid who from their neighboring shop who is about like 10-year old. So he acted as a translator because he was like perfectly fluent in both Uyghur and Mandarin Chinese. So I mean, like just by being there, interacting with locals, you realize all these stuff in the Western propaganda. It's just 100% projection. They're trying to say what China is doing in Xinjiang today is equivalent to what US and Canada were doing to the Native Americans in the Indian schools, right? Like uproot the children separate them from their families, their community, and force them to assimilate and learn English. That was not the case, man. Like kids just go to school like anywhere else, and they go home afterwards. I've been there. I saw, I was there during the afternoon rush hour when all the kids ride their bicycle to go home.
Yeah, no. When I met the same kid that I was talking about, he brought he called him his brother, but actually it was, if I remember correctly, his mother's brother. But they said in Uyghur culture he would still just call him brother. He was, I think he was in his late 30s. He's a tradesman. He works for I guess renovation, like he does home renovations and stuff like that. Basically a manual laborer. He's in his, I would say in his late 30s. And yeah, we had to, my friend, the kid, he had to translate for us when I was talking to him. He could say a few things, but not much. Now he brought his daughter also, who was, I believe she was either 10 or 12 years old. So when I asked her and my friend, they both, who's 14, they both said that they actually prefer studying and learning Mandarin. Now, that's their own personal preference. And I think that seems like that's going to be a natural thing that happens anywhere. It doesn't mean they can't speak Uyghur. They do. I mean, they're the ones who are doing all the translating for me. But they have a propensity towards Mandarin. They said for them also learning standard simplified Chinese is actually even easier than learning Uyghur script. So that's probably part of it. So there is going to be a natural erosion, but they're going to when that happens, they're going to blame the Chinese government for that on the outside.
I'll explain about the Uyghur script because so there are two types of script to writing the Uyghur. There's a Latin-based script, which people use usually for online communication, but there's a traditional script which is written in Persian Arabic script. This is probably why, because traditionally the Uyghur language is transcribed using the Persian Arabic script. So this is probably why he find it harder to learn the script, the Uyghur script, because it was written in traditionally they have to kind of learn the Arabic script that transcribes the sound of the Uyghur language. That's a difficult part.
Yeah, and the kids are going to naturally levitate towards what's easier. I mean, so my kids, their reference point in their school is Chinese and English, and they levitate towards English. They still have the opportunity and requirement even to learn Chinese, but their English has become stronger because of that. So I would imagine that it's the same for there. And so it's reasonable to expect that there will be some natural level of erosion. But when you zoom out and you look at how culture has been preserved in China, it has been preserved in China way more than anywhere else. And that's especially apparent when you compare ethnic minority groups in China that also have an ethnic homeland. So, for example, Kazakh people in Xinjiang. One of my Kazakh friends from Xinjiang said when he goes to Kazakhstan, so many of them can't speak Kazakh anymore. They can only speak Russian. We had an international school teacher at our school who was from Kyrgyzstan, and she said when she saw the Kyrgyz people in Xinjiang, she couldn't believe it. It was like looking into the past. They were still using words and terminology and practicing culture that they had long lost. In Inner Mongolia, they know how to write with the original Mongolian script. They can't even do that in Mongolia proper. There's a national revitalization project to try to bring it back. And the ironic thing is they're probably going to have to use textbooks from China to bring it back. And then when I went to Kashgar 2 weeks ago, I went to the Tashgurkan, the region near the Pakistan border, and I met some premier Pakistanis who come over to mainland China. They don't require a visa. They just need a travel permit. And when I got this is one guy from that region who opened up a restaurant in that area, Pakistani food. And a lot of his customers were from Pakistan. And when I got talking to them, they were telling me that the culture, which is the equivalent to the Tajik people on this side. There's different Tajik ethnic groups within the Tajik category in China, but the ones specific close to that region, they can communicate in their local language. And they said that the culture here on the China side has been so well preserved In comparison on the Pakistan side, they've lost so much of that. They've become more westernized. And so there's no claim that Pakistan is deliberately trying to do that, but that's just a natural thing that happens over time. I then went to another restaurant where it's also opened by a premier Pakistani, and amazing food, by the way. You have to go to this place if you're ever out there. I couldn't believe it. Like I wasn't expecting like the pizzas. I was like, how can they make a good pizza here? It was literally one of the best pizzas we've ever had. Amazing. But when I started talking to him, I started asking him the same question. I said, oh, you always hear about this, or like, how is the culture over here? He said, yeah, it's like really preserved well. And then I wanted to provoke more of a response from him. So I said, oh, overseas they say that in China they're erasing, cultures. And he started laughing. He said, no, he says, we've become so westernized on the Pakistan side. On the China side, they still preserved the language exactly as it was. They still wear the same clothes that they used to wear. They still play the same games like Tajik polo and stuff like that. And they said so much of that has been lost on the Pakistan side. So to get back to my main point, I think there is going to be a continuous natural erasure to some of the traditional culture, but still it is preserved and continues to be preserved way better than it has anywhere else.
Well, I mean, definitely compared to US and Canada. I mean, 90% of most of the people in China, they still fluent in their local language. Like that's my experience traveling in Xinjiang and also traveling to Yunnan. I went to the ethnic Dai area in Yunnan. Like it's no question. And all those areas, the government are promoting the local culture for tourism because their distinct local ethnic culture now is a drawing point for domestic Chinese tourism. And so they actually amplify it and promote it. And that's what I saw as a tourist. And to because you actually do see the difference when you travel to these regions when you still see the locals celebrate their own local festivals and cultural traditions. I was in Mangsi, which is near the Myanmar border, where they celebrate in China they call Po Sui Jie, the water festival, but it's basically the same holiday as Songkran in Thailand. It's kind of the New Year according to the Thai and the Burmese calendar, and it's a completely different. And they really have preserved their culture very well down there.
Yeah, and if it gets to a point where a culture becomes endangered, they also step in. So in southern Yunnan, there's a group called the Wadzu people who are very ethnically similar to the people from Myanmar. And their language is considered endangered. I can't remember the exact term, but basically endangered. It doesn't necessarily make sense to introduce a massive portion of curriculum in their local language into the public schools at a childhood level when they go out into public, they're going to need to tap into basically the Chinese economy and participate in the Chinese economy. But what they have done is they've introduced specialty university programs and research centers to gather as much material as possible and allow people to study it in that environment for anybody who wants to study specifically cultures or to preserve it or whatever it is. So they give you these avenues to do that, even though it doesn't necessarily make sense to create an entire curriculum for every single minority language. I mean, even within China itself, the Han people speak their own dialects across the entire region. But they're not going to teach, in Chongqing public schools, they're not going to teach you in Chongqing dialect. That just wouldn't make any sense. But all the kids still know how to speak Chongqinghua. They speak it with their parents. Even my daughter, who is 4.5 years old, her best friend in school is from Chongqing, and she's coming back speaking some Chongqinghua now. And like we just
nice.
I can't remember what she says. She said, "What's Chongqing di?" I don't know how she says it, but
what's Chongqing di?
And it's like really authentic. So, culturally, a lot of this stuff will survive, but it's a very difficult thing to manage when you've got so many different dialects and languages, and you have to figure out how to reconcile that. I think it's correct that predominantly the main curriculum needs to be in Mandarin Chinese. That's also going to give people the most economic opportunities. But there is no evidence of these cultures being eroded in the way that is being described by these foreign propaganda outlets. Let's see here. Okay, so are you still connected or are you frozen?
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm still here.
So we have, where were we? So we got to the alcohol one. Oh, this is a fun one. You sent this to me from Eric posted this. And it was funny because when you sent me that tweet, I had literally just met Eric in Chongqing. He's a really cool guy. So he posted this story. American friend is visiting China and unknowingly received fake Chinese bills in the US. She used them to buy some jewelry yesterday, and today the police showed up at our hotel. We apologized to pay the bill, and that was it. Shocked at how nice the police and store owner are. I'm not sure if I have the follow-up tweet. Oh, yeah. So then you sent the follow-up tweet saying, I'm glad your friend was treated with a presumption of innocence and respect by Chinese police. Meant to make a contrast with my anecdote of meeting an Irish tourist who got arrested for also using fake bills in the US, but ended up oversharing about my own false arrest, and I'm embarrassed. But yeah, it's the same thing. Like if you're anywhere else, it's going to be a lot more of a process if you were caught using fake bills and leaving. You want to add to that?
Oh yeah. I just thought it was funny because the other guy shared like he met this Irish guy who actually went to prison because of the he was caught with accidentally somehow carrying the fake bill. They both were detained. Whereas in China they just said, okay, don't do that anymore. Like those bills are fake. Make sure you don't use them anymore. That's it. And that has been my experience with the Chinese police, because in the West, China is portrayed as some sort of police state, right? I mean, because I was in China, so for people who don't know, China do require foreigners to register their place of residence. You're supposed to do that within like 24 hours or 48 hours within landing. Normally, if you're a tourist, your hotels take care of that, so you don't even know that that's a thing. But so I was staying with my auntie, so and I didn't know that requirement. And then my auntie got a call from the local police department. It's like, oh, we heard you got an American staying over, you have to register him. So we're like, oh, okay, we're sorry, we didn't know. So we just went to the local police station and just fill out some paperwork. That's it. There's no fine, no nothing. They just says, oh yeah, make sure you know this rule. That's it. I mean, it's just like that. It's maybe a little annoyance, but overall, it's not a scary experience. Which I couldn't say about my interaction with the police in United States. Because one time in LA, I just came home late. At the time with my Mexican ex, I was pulled over by a police because one of my tail light was out, which I wasn't aware of, and so I had to stop giving him my driver license, insurance, and all that. So while I was waiting for him to check all that, I was getting a little bit impatient because it's like 11 o'clock at night. I wanted to go home and sleep, so I had my hands. My window are down. I had my hands out. I was just tapping with my hands on the side of the car. And because of that, this guy pulled a gun on me. He pulled a gun, he called backup. So it's like 2 or 3 police cars all came together and they all pulled a gun on me, ordered me to step out the car. They had my hands pinned behind my back, and then they're trying to find out if I was high on drugs or on alcohol. They made me do a breath analyzer test and all that. I was like, holy shit! Later he explained. He said, I thought you were acting erratically, erratically tapping your. I was like, holy shit! Just because I did that I was sitting in my own car. I wasn't going out of my car. I was just sitting in my own car, tapping inside of my car, and you freaking call like another 2 police car and to pull gun on me. And I understand he was like, this was like in San Pedro, it's like a Latino neighborhood, and this is like a young white police guy who's probably like first time on his job or probably very nervous working in this the San Pedro wasn't known for like like being perfectly nice, safe neighborhood. But you know, he probably think I was some kind of gangbanger, was on drugs or whatever.
Well,
But
especially if
still,
you were
I mean,
dressed
like
like that too. Like, were you wearing one of these shirts?
I don't remember. I don't remember. I was with my Mexican ex, so you know, I don't know. Maybe that somehow in his eyes, I'm like this drug kingpin, this Asian gangster. You know, like
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. No, yeah, I mean, I just like 3 weeks ago, I was making for lunch, I was making sandwiches for the kids, and I realized I didn't have cheese, and so I quickly jumped on my motorbike. I looked for my helmet, I couldn't find it, and everything else was prepared. So I thought, okay, whatever. I just rode down to the local Hema supermarket, and at the last intersection, it's not far. It's like 2 kilometers or something, 3 maximum. And so I went without a helmet. And then I was waiting at the traffic lights, and there was an officer standing right in the middle of the intersection directing traffic. And he kept looking at me. And then they usually don't care. They don't always pay attention if like somebody's riding an e-bike without a helmet. But this time he was just looking at me. It was a proper motorbike. And then I crossed the intersection. He didn't say anything, got the cheese. And then when I came back, then he walked over to me because I was stopped at a red light. He's like, all right, let me just check this out, because it was convenient enough for him. I think if it was green, he probably wouldn't have said anything. And then he checked. He asked me why I'm not wearing a helmet. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I just quickly came out to get this. And he checked to make sure I actually had a motorbike license. And after that, he's like, okay, next time wear your helmet. That's it. You know? They don't like having to actually punish people. Yeah. Let's see here. So we have. Yeah. Oh, you know what? Before we move on, I asked Eric, because he told me about that story while we were having lunch, like literally a couple hours before you sent me that post. So I asked him if it was okay that I shared the rest of the story, and he said, "Sure. Let me give you the full context." So I'll just read it directly. He said, full story is, so this is regarding the fake money that was spent in Chongqing, and the police showed up at the door. So he said, full story is that she dated a Chinese American guy for a number of years, who's a good friend of mine, and his grandma, who's probably 85 years old and lives in Flushing, Queens, New York City, gave her some RMB a couple of years ago. She's in town because she works for a big tech company that manufactures wearables in China. She bought around $100 worth of jewelry from Blackhead, paid mostly in cash, partly on WeChat. She left town yesterday morning to go back to the factory, and police showed up at the hotel about an hour later. I apologized a lot. Cop called the store owner, got the WeChat QR code. I sent the money, and then he allowed me to leave her a voice note on WeChat to apologize, and haven't heard back from them since. That's it. Like, that's it. Yeah. It's like, just get your friend to send an apology by WeChat voice message so that he can hear it and pay the money, and then that's it.
Yeah.
No, it's quite remarkable.
Yeah, that's pretty common. That's pretty common interaction with cops in China. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So that was. Oh yeah. This is your one. I like this one because you made a really good point. If 50,000 English people all moved to China, creating a 95% ethnic English town, and set up their own Christian schools and English-only emergency services, I would not consider them to be integrated into Chinese culture. Now, this is funny because this is like a pro-British account, and he probably didn't realize what kind of a self-own that he was putting together, that this is kind of exactly the thing that happened. So your response, I really liked, which was, British passed Peak District Reservation Ordinance in 1904 to ban Chinese from living on Victoria Peak in Hong Kong because Bruce Lee's grandpa, Ho Kam Tong, considered buying a home there alongside his elder brother, Robert Ho Tong. British HK governor was incensed that Ho Tong, a half Chinese guy, lived with a large family above his own residence in the Peak. So, I mean, that's kind of exactly what they try to do. And they don't ever try to reconcile.
Exactly.
I don't know if you want to add on that. Yeah.
And they did that for a half century. I mean, they didn't repeal that until well after World War II. So for half a century, that was a law of the land. They forbid any Chinese to live on Victoria Peak unless with explicit permission of the British colonial governor. And this is all because Bruce Lee's granddad wanted to buy a house there. And how it was triggered, it was because at that time, Bruce Lee's granddad's older brother, Robert Hotong, first rented a house on the Peak. And then when the first rented a house from and then a British judge, and then when a new British colonial governor came into town, he realized, holy crap, there's a Chinese family. There's a large Chinese family that lives above his own house. And for him, that was unacceptable. Like, how dare these Chinese now living above me, like physically living above me. And so later, so he ordered the British judge who rented the house to Hotong to cancel the contract. The judge just wanted money, so he's like, but he's only half Chinese, like the colonial government is like, I don't care, like that's too much Chinese for me. And then so Robert Hotong, then later he moved out of that house and he just bought a new house on the Peak, because he was a multi-millionaire at that time. And this was also at the time when the Chinese merchant in Hong Kong, like the Ho brothers, they were becoming wealthier than the British, which made the British authority very uncomfortable, because the whole idea of the colony, the British were supposed to be at the top. Then you have these like Chinese who are wealthier than them buying up property in what they consider should be European exclusive zone. So this is what triggered that law. The urgency is after Robert Hotong bought his house, then Bruce Lee's grandpa Ho Kantong said, "Oh, okay, my brother's house looks nice. I'm gonna buy another house right next to you." And then that's when they got up in arms, like, "Oh my God, it's a Chinese invasion of the neighborhood." So that's when they passed that Peak reservation ordinance in 1904, explicitly, to prevent Ho Kantong, Bruce Lee's grandfather, from buying a house there.
Yeah, in Hong Kong, a Chinese city. It's really remarkable, especially when you look at the kind of younger people who were co-opted into the riots in 2019. When you hear the talk about, Hong Kong was a democracy, they brought freedom and democracy to us. No, they didn't. You had an unelected governor. You had all of these laws that disadvantaged the locals. The British were prioritized. You didn't have any voting except for up until approaching handover. They introduced voting for your local district councillors, which still exists today. That was something that they're like, okay, we're going to put voting in now in place, so it looks like we did something, and we'll hand that problem to the Chinese. They did not have freedom and democracy. And as a matter of fact, Hong Kong after handover, if you look at how freedom is measured in the West, I'm not saying it's a perfect measurement of freedom, at least the West's version of freedom, taxation, size of government, freedom of movement, freedom of religion, equal rights for women and men, all this kind of stuff, freedom of media. Hong Kong was ranking, according to Western standards on the Cato Institute's chart, as the second freest place on earth for a long time. Now, obviously, after the riots, the government realized, okay, we can't have just a completely open society where Western NGOs can come in and cooperate with our universities to brainwash, our kids and things like that. But there was so much more freedom after handover than there was before. There was so much more equality.
That's the thing, though. A lot of those kids, they never experienced British colonialism, because if you look at their age, most of them have grown up after 1997 handover. So they experienced the one country, two system, but they didn't get to experience the real raw British colonialism. And if you watch some older Hong Kong movies, even from like 1990s, like Jet Li's Once Upon a Time in China, a lot of these older movies have a very strong anti-colonial message. If you look at, for example, Jackie Chan's like Drunken Master or Jet Li's Once Upon a Time in China series, those are very nationalistic movies. Like they're like it has a very undisguised, anti-colonial message in there. But because the older generation, they actually lived through that. They actually lived through the British colonialism. They knew what it was like to be under the boots of the British. But these younger ones, they actually never experienced that. This is why they thought there was some imaginary like utopia, like golden past they're trying to return to.
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate irony also, these young writers or supporters meeting with Chris Patton, holding him up as an example of something great from Hong Kong's past, and having Chris Patton lecture Hong Kong about freedom from the perspective of Hong Kong's last colonial unelected governor. Like they have no sense of shame whatsoever. Couple of quick shout outs to some friends I see in here. Reportify Media, Alex, hello, good to see you. Also Fernando, if you're still here, good to see you. And anybody else who I'm missing, I don't know if this is Duran. Hello, Duran. Is that from the Duran? I don't think that's from Duran show, but hello anyways. I didn't know this. There's in North Vancouver, there's still some no sale to Chinese in some real estate contracts. Is that a question? I don't know. It would be hard to imagine that that's possible. That's pretty outrageous if it is, but I don't know how legally they would possibly be able to accomplish that. I don't know if you know anything about this. Another shout out here. Indonesia has allowed its airspace for U.S. military to use with unlimited access. Indonesia.
No. It was proposed. This was proposed by the U.S. But at that time, when the Indonesian defense minister was meeting with Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, this was explicitly brought out by the U.S. But at that time, the Indonesian foreign minister actually sent a explicit message to the Indonesian defense minister: do not sign that agreement. Do not sign that agreement. This would be very bad. So yeah, this was reported that the U.S. has proposed it, but Indonesia has not finally ratified it.
Right.
And this is the people don't understand. People think like, oh, what side is Indonesia on? Is it pro US, pro China? They're just pro Indonesia, man. Like most of the countries in this region, they're pro their own country. And what Indonesia has always tried to do is try to strike a balance. So even though traditionally Indonesian Air Force have purchased US fighter jets, but they have, in more recent years, they have been switching to purchasing Russian Su-30s, and now there was report they're trying to purchase Chinese J-10C. So Indonesia, they're not trying to pick a side. It's the United States that's trying to force these countries to pick a side. In Southeast Asia, the policy is we want to be friends of all and enemy to none. Like the last thing the Southeast Asian country want to do is to pick a side. But it's the United States that's saying you are either with us or against us.
Yep. Yeah. We'll move on to another topic here. This is another one I had sent to you, where it's a weird response to this, but somebody was comparing the size of Columbus's ship to Zhenghe. And the response, which got a lot of likes, is when you miss the opportunity to colonize America and need some cope, but our ship was bigger. Like, what? Like, that's what you're bragging about? The fact that China is exactly like it says, it is not a colonializing power like the West has been, that it acted exactly like it said it acts according to its values. Like,
I saw a very similar tweet. Somebody posted a map of Australia and said, "Oh, isn't it ironic? When Australia is so much closer to China and India, these large countries with a lot of population, yet it was the plucky Britain that sailed all the way across the world to colonize Australia." And and while China and India didn't even know this place existed, well, actually they knew. There's a lot of evidence that there were contact because people from the Indonesian archipelago, they were trading with the northern territories of Australia for goods that was produced there, and then they resell it to the Chinese. So and we also have like shipwrecks off the northern coast of Australia that was Chinese junks carrying porcelain and all the Chinese goods. So China actually was aware there was something there, and they were trading with those people there. Except they're not colonizers; they didn't feel the need to go out there and colonize. Which is, and I quote tweeted that particular tweet, and I said, well, this is because for centuries, for millennia, China and India were the world's largest economy. People there, they did not need to go out of their country to seek prosperity. In contrast to Europe in the early modern period, it's precisely because the Europeans were comparatively poor. That's why they seek to the trade route to the fabulously wealthy East, whether it's through Columbus sailing to West or Magellan, sailing around the Cape of Good Hope. They have a big incentive to go out and loot more resource-rich areas, which the Chinese and Indians simply didn't have because they already have a huge continental-sized economy they could trade with themselves with. They didn't have that need to go out and to colonize and loot and pillage. And a lot of people got triggered by that. But anyways, but that's just a fact.
Yeah, I mean, these are the same people who will, without any sense of irony, a couple of weeks later, talk about the risk of China taking over the world, while they're still celebrating that this is in their blood. This is what they do. And I think there's a tweet that emphasizes the ridiculousness of that point. Perfectly from Gordon Chang, one of our favorites anti-China content creators. One of his tweets where he says, "In a calm world, China appeared dominant, but in the current turbulent period, the Chinese state looks far less powerful. Trump is driving events, and Xi Jinping is merely an observer. China's fate is now in America's hands, not its own." This is the same guy. Like I said, the point, he's the same guy that said it is going to be China that creates turbulence for the world, that is risky, that is, disruptive and all this kind of stuff. And then when China fails to act in the way that he says, they paint that as some sort of a weakness, even though their prediction about China was wrong. And then when it turns out that their own country,
Gordon Chan has some serious daddy issue, man. Interview, he actually admitted he thinks his Chinese dad married his Scottish American mom for green card. He actually said that in the interview.
I saw that. And when you see that, but yeah, actually, to finish my last point, that America is acting in the way that they said that we had to be afraid that China would, and now they're celebrating that, saying that that's something to be proud of. But yeah, Gordon Chang, half Chinese, when he was in that interview, I've shared it a few times on Twitter, when he talks about his name, his full name, including his middle name, Gordon, and then he says with enthusiasm, Guthrie Chang. Chang is the Chinese part of my name. Suddenly he just goes, he drops down, and he said, growing up in a place with all white kids, I just wanted to be American. He has serious psychological scars that causes him to post the most ridiculous stuff about China in order to gain acceptance and prove that he is not part of his Chinese identity. I mean, there's something deeply psychological that's going on. Previously, he used to present stuff where you could almost somewhat believe, if you were unaware of, China, you could somewhat believe that he's a serious person. But now when he's posting stuff like, I have it on good authority that China's, planning a 9/11-like attack on America, or that I heard from a friend in the Middle East that China's happy that there's a blockade going on because if there were peaceful talks between Iran and America, they would find out how involved China is in their nuclear program. Like a friend told him, like all this like wild conspiracy stuff that is not founded in any evidence, where he's just gone completely unhinged. And I think perhaps, he's getting up to an age now where it must be really frustrating, not only, trying to predict the fall of China, but hoping for it. You can tell that it's not just an academic prediction. It is a hope. It is a desire. And as he's coming towards the later stages of his life, realizing that that's not happening must be so frustrating for him.
The ironic part is the reason he gets invited to all these mainstream channels like CNN, like Fox News, precisely is because he has a Chinese face. Now he can present all these anti-China. He kind of lend credence to all these his anti-China views, because look, he's Asian. He's obviously Chinese. So he must know what he's talking about. And somehow he always also get passed around as like a Korean expert. Like he talk about Korean politics a lot. I'm like, dude, he's not even Korean. Like he has no cultural connection to Korea whatsoever. Just because he has an Asian face, now he goes on CNN and talk about Korean. Like, what does he know about Korea? He doesn't even speak the language. This is ridiculous.
No, it's crazy. There's a clip that you sent me that really fits in well with this topic too, in terms of actually realizing that it is America causing all of the chaos that people predicted China would. And then those same people now celebrating that it is America in control of that chaos. So in control maybe is a loose term, but at least causing the chaos. And let's play that video for everybody to see. Here we go.
And there was no response. Turn your ship around. Evacuate your engine room immediately. And you see all these guys running out of there. Now, they're 5 miles away, and one shot into the engine room, blew up the engine room. The ship stopped. They used tugboats, and then we landed on top of it. On top of everything else, we then land on top of it, and we took over the ship. We took over the cargo, took over the oil. It's a very profitable business. Who would have thought we were doing that? We're like pirates. We're sort of like pirates. But we're not playing games because, for 47 years, Iran has been pushing everybody around. They're the bully.
And people cheered. And people cheer. Yeah. He's like, we're like pirates. We're like pirates. We went down and grabbed the oil, and people cheer. And freaking, all these clapping, the clapping seals in the audience. Like Donald Trump, he just publicly admitted the U.S. Navy is acting like pirates. And like, this is one thing I appreciate about Trump. Is his honesty. He's very honest about American imperialism. It's like, we want that oil. We will get that oil.
Yeah, exactly. And all of those same people clapping are the same people who wanted you to believe that it was China who was going to unleash evil upon the world like this. Now clapping for the fact that they are the pirates. Didn't turn out. China still hasn't done the things that they say they will do. But they're clapping that they themselves are owning that domain. And then in terms of the military, also this ties into it. There was reports of how bad the food was on the aircraft carriers that the U.S. is sending overseas towards the Strait of Hormuz, and like they barely have enough rations. And then they posted these pictures to try to disprove it, and it looked like AI pictures. You picked up on one here. I don't know how it's
they are AI pictures.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
There are AI pictures. They're obviously AI pictures. I mean, like, what the heck is that guy's head doing? It's like straight into the metal cabinet. And that is
yeah. Maybe he's tasting the stainless steel. I don't know.
And that is for the official U.S. Navy account to say, "Oh, we are serving plenty of food to our sailors. Look at how much food they're getting through our AI-generated slop."
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it is something else. Quick shadow. Thank you for that super chat. You didn't ask a question. You should leave a question there if you have anything you want to say. But thank you for that. Yeah, no, that is really funny. And then in terms of American imperialistic behavior, I want to add something. Now, this is going to be a 3-minute video, but it's a really important story, and it's from the Prime Minister of my country, Canada, talking about what happened when Bombardier, a Canadian company, was making waves in the aviation industry. And there's a lot to unpack with it afterwards. So let's watch that first. It's 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Here we go.
China has never yet been able to get an internationally certified significant commercial aircraft. They have some smaller ones that they can use locally, but neither the Americans or the Europeans, which are the agencies that the rest of the world looks to see whether you can add, a big passenger jet to your fleet, are anywhere near certifying anything built completely in China. So, about 10 years ago, Bombardier, a Canadian aerospace company that you know for making the Global Series and Challengers, decided it was going to get into the commercial aircraft building business. And it built something called the C Series, which was the most modern, single-aisle, extremely fuel-efficient, amazing plane. And we're in the process, they got it certified, they were in the process of trying to sell it, and Airbus and Boeing did everything they could do to prevent Bombardier from being able to sell those aircraft. They were talking to all their customers, don't you dare put in an order for the C Series, don't you dare, don't you dare. And finally, Bombardier started really struggling. They had this beautiful aircraft, but they just couldn't get any customers for it. So what happens? China comes knocking on Canada's door, on Bombardier's door, and pulls up a dump truck full of money and says, we'll keep all the jobs in Bombardier across the country. Canada won't be trouble in this, but we'll buy Bombardier. We'll be able to get ourselves a commercial jet. So Boeing and Airbus, that were busy trying to put out Bombardier out of business because they didn't want Bombardier to be a contest, almost drove us into China's arms, where China would have been obviously a much more significant competitor to those two dominant players. But concretely, it took me around the G7 table in Sicily, my second G7 in 2017, saying to Macron and Merkel and Trump, you are driving us into Chinese pockets, Chinese hands to protect jobs. They're willing to pay anything to get this. We don't want this to happen for our prosperity as Western countries. What can we do about it? Because Boeing is busy trying to put Bombardier out of business, and Airbus has crossed its arms and indifferent. Well, 6 months later, because of those conversations, Airbus bought the C Series, which now flies as the Airbus 220. They're made in Canada and elsewhere, and Canada's now the 5th Airbus country. So this was an example of internal economic pressures and coercion that where we're busy competing with ourselves as like-minded nations, we almost ended up giving a significant competitor that doesn't share the same approach and views as us a significant let up. And that wouldn't have happened if I and my team hadn't said, hey, guys, this is the trend line. We need to make that happen. We're seeing a similar thing happen right now with President Trump threatening the Canadian auto industry, where we're now having to look at working with China because the American industry doesn't want to work with us anymore.
You know, it's really unbelievable. It's really remarkable that he would tell that story and talk about, to tout his own successes and how he prevented cooperation with China, when you are, especially now, in an environment where America has been threatening to take over Canada, and Canada is realizing that they need to diversify away from the US, how could you not look at that as a missed opportunity to have a more diversified economy that doesn't rely on such an erratic power? He's celebrating that didn't happen. And on what basis? Saying that, oh, they don't share the same views as us. Thank God for that. Thank God they're not celebrating the attacks in Iran and what's happening to the people in Gaza. But that aside, that That's all it takes, and that's and that's why the largely American-funded propaganda is so important, because it gets you saying nonsensical stuff like this, saying, "Wow, we could diversify our economy. The Chinese could work with us on something. We would be, far less beholden to one single power." Basically, the diversification that Canada is looking for. But no, we can't do that because they don't share our values. Like, what? What's going on?
He said the Chinese came with armed boat, with tons of money, and somehow that's a bad thing. Because we don't share the same value. So we'd rather be bought out. And it was due to my own effort that I got it Bombardier sold to Airbus instead. Now, now it's perfect. Like, I mean, okay, he didn't really clarify why China coming in offering all this money is a bad thing, except this hand waving. Oh, no same values, no good. I mean, I come on. He's okay. I'm just gonna come on and say it. He's just saying we white people gotta stick together. we white people, Europeans, we gotta stick together. We can't let the sneaky Chinese gaining up on us.
It's true. And when you look at even Carney's speech that was celebrated, excuse me, at the World Economic Forum, even in his language, where he admits that, the rest of the world, especially kind of the global south, he was hinting at the fact that they have been disadvantaged by an unfair system. Yet within his speech, he still talks about like-minded or second-tier powers coming together. So he still has that language, even though it seems like he's way more, open to the fact of diverse cooperation and all this kind of stuff. Still hidden in his language was this idea that these other Western powers, without the U.S., now that the U.S. has become erratic, still need to stick together. It's still there in the language. So let's see here. So we had
and what's the point? What's the point of having? I mean, it all sounds great. This is like all this EU propaganda say together we're strong, and they post a graph compared to individual EU countries with China or United States, and they say, oh, but together we're comparable to US and China. What's the point if you don't actually act independently from the United States? You have you are together now. You have an institution of EU, and yet all you do is just be the flying puppy dog to the United States. So what is the point? What is the point? And this same. This is the only time they showed disagreement was when United States specifically went after Greenland. That's when Macron wrote that message to Trump. He said, oh, we used to work beautifully together. We worked beautifully together on Syria. We can do that together again on Iran. I don't understand why you're coming after Greenland. It's like let's all gang up on the brown people together, right? And we white people got to stick together. I mean, that's what they're really saying.
Yeah. It's still, like I said, it's still in the language also. And so that propaganda that leads to this ridiculous narrative of, oh, we can't deal with China. It's almost like they have to say that also because their public is primed to hear something like that. Like, it's almost like if he did say, we got to find a way to work more closely with China, there would be a huge portion of society, maybe less than before, but still a large portion of society would be like, no, we can't do that. They're evil. And that's why the propaganda is so important. So they're trying to bring back the forced labor stuff also. You have this guy, from Human Rights Watch, right? Kenneth is Human Rights Watch. The Chinese government says that it's using Uyghur forced labor, yet blocks any independent investigation.
Again.
That's not true. The UN,
every time, man.
Yeah, the UN did some investigations and actually concluded that the sanctions against those companies were unfounded and even illegal. You had, Skechers who did independent investigations, but they never referred to those because they need you to believe that it's this black hole that hasn't been answered. It's part of the propaganda. Let's see.
This is what they do. They first come out with outrageous claim, and then in a month it turns out the story is no longer is not true, but they already move on to the next claim, and the idea that China is bad already got embedded in the public consciousness. This is what they did with that ridiculous red chip story. They say that China, because in manufacturing the motherboard, they put on this malicious chip that was embedded that will allow China to gather all kind of information, and that claim was debunked like half a year later. But the first claim that the China did this, that went viral. Everybody saw it, and the claim, very few people read it. So like people still have it in their head, in their mind, that China is doing this like really sneaky spying stuff by embedding a malicious red chip on your motherboard. I mean, like, this is classic propaganda, and it works every time. The whole thing about all these Canadians getting incensed about doing business with China when they say, "Oh, but why we should stick to our allies, United States." Do they realize the U.S. also do business with China? I mean, Trump is going to China. Why are you so upset that your leader is meeting with Xi Jinping when Trump is going to do exactly the same thing next week? I mean, like, but these people don't think.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was the same when Huawei was on the up and up, and their 5G towers were outperforming Qualcomm and all these different, mainstream companies that have been around for a long time. The British top spy agency did a deep analysis, deep dive, took apart Huawei equipment, and they couldn't find any backdoors whatsoever. Yet, based on that backdoor narrative, they still were pushed into banning it from their country. I mean, perhaps one of the reasons is because it doesn't have backdoors, because the existing infrastructure obviously does have backdoors for the U.S. Through they have a company called Crypto AG, which was at the center of a scandal for being able to listen in on Angela Merkel's calls and all of this kind of stuff. Like, that's part of the problem, is that they don't exist. But these kinds of narratives are responsible. They're required for that. Now you've got the most ridiculous thing. Arnaud Bertrand pointed this out, where you have energy prices in Europe going through the roof because, Russian oil has been cut off. And now they're trying to find a way to ban Chinese solar panels and EVs and all this kind of stuff under the guise of national security once again. So basically, they're getting screwed in every single way, without any escape route from these incredibly high energy prices, which is going to impact their ability to manufacture competitively. Also, they're just destroying themselves over these narratives. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, they're tying themselves ever more tightly to the U.S. boat. So now they have to depend on the very expensive imported American LNG. Which is what Washington wanted, but that's what these EU leaders are there for. The whole purpose is to co-opt the whole EU for Washington's interest. Yet you see all these EU propaganda saying, together we're strong, we can be as strong as the United States and China. Then what do? Then you do nothing. Then you just be Washington's puppy dogs. Then what's the point?
Yeah, no, exactly. So the forced labor, and then, this is kind of fun. It's getting a little bit off, not totally off topic, but I found this tweet really interesting. A great contrast, which is the Victims of Communism Museum in Washington, D.C., with an actual victim of communism lying right in front, or capitalism lying right in front of it. And that made me kind of think about how ridiculous it is, because obviously the Victims of Communism is behind the Black Book of Communism that talks about how many millions of deaths are attributed to communism, but they include things like the Nazi soldiers who were killed, at the hands of Soviet soldiers. Like those are victims of communism. Like, okay,
well, they are victims of communism. Yeah. They're legit victims of communism.
yeah. I mean, I think they updated it recently to include COVID deaths.
Oh yeah.
Like, but if you were to create an equivalent, with the same level or lack of level of sensitivity and so broad, where you talked about the victims of capitalism. So anybody that was, killed in a war that a capitalist power was involved in, anybody who had lack of access to basic medicine or anything like that, or even there's a story of, like this is there's so many outrageous stories of capitalism, but this is one that I came across recently where Nestle did a program in Africa where they introduced a baby formula to African mothers, and they gave it to them for free, but they only gave it to them for long enough so that their natural breast milk production would stop. And then as soon as it stopped, they said, okay, if you want to continue using it, you need to pay now. And they couldn't afford it. So they had to try to get it as a little, whatever they could get, and they would dilute it down to make it last as long as possible. And it resulted in malnutrition, stunted development. Those are very clearly, victims of capitalism, and you don't even have to stretch the meaning of it to include people like that. And so,
this is what, like, when people pointed out, what about, look at the success of modern China, and then people will say no, because that's not communism, that's capitalism. And then you say, well, okay, let's do capitalism the way China does. Then they will say, no, that's communism. We can't have that. So this is a Schrodinger's definition, like Schrodinger's China or Schrodinger's communism. You can be whatever they wanted.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, though, I can't remember the name. I've got to look it up. But there was an Indian social scientist, or I can't remember exactly, but he came up with this comparison. He said that if you take the high end of the reasonable numbers that people want to try to attribute towards Mao Zedong in terms of deaths, and you want to take away any of the environmental factors that led to famines during that time and all this kind of stuff, and you took one of the really high-end numbers, like 30 million people. Let's say he was responsible for the death of 30 million people. And you look at the policies that China put in place, and some of them were very messy when they implemented them, the land reforms, the Cultural Revolution, all of this kind of stuff. And you consider that somewhere like India, where in the post-colonial period, India and China both had similar GDP, similar population. India took a completely different route. They didn't have that hard reset that China did. And as a result, there's a lot of people who don't have a hometown like everybody in China has, or they don't have access to basic services. And you consider how many premature deaths are attributed to that in India. It has been 7 million people every single year. And when you add that up, it has far exceeded any of the estimates that people want to attribute towards Mao Zedong and the Chinese policies that created the hard reset that was required to get China to where it is now. I was looking at one of my old videos just yesterday, actually, because every time when I run into people in public who recognize me, they always talk about my videos where I was in my car in Shenzhen driving around just talking. And I can't even remember what I was saying during that time. And that's like 2019, 2020, something like that. And I was listening to myself, and I was talking about, and I was kind of agreeing with some of the Western narratives that Chinese people suffered under the, Chinese Communist Party at a certain period of time. And it was a really tough period without any nuance in terms of how required those hard resets were required for China to be where it is today.
Yeah, earlier you show a graph of the life expectancy in China that it just went parabolic. You went, so like a lot of people were surprised. There was a sharp increase during Cultural Revolution, like in the 1960s, and this is actually because the way life expectancy is calculated, because there's a lot of infant mortality. A lot of babies die. And what happened in Cultural Revolution was that Mao sent a lot of the so-called barefoot doctor to the countryside that provided medical service to the rural population that drastically reduced infant mortality, so babies stopped dying. And that's why you see this sharp rise of the life expectancy, because now babies are not dying when they're like, few month old or year old for lack of medical service.
That would definitely bring the average down. Yeah, for sure. We're getting towards our last few images here. I've got one that you sent to me that is not really necessarily China related, but I'm sure you have something to say about it. Let's go. Let's see here.
Well, I mean, come on, like this. I was so glad I already had my passport renewed. Like we are in, like United States now is like a banana republic. I mean, like this is ridiculous, man. What is this?
I saw a news report where they were showing all of the government agencies that have huge banners and pictures of Trump's face on the side of them now. And they were comparing it to North Korea. I mean, that's always the thing they do. Like, you do the most American thing possible, and then you say, "Are we like, what's the meme? It's like, are we like Asians?" It's like, no, like just
bunch of Asians. Are we bunch of Asians?
yeah, that's it. That's the meme. It's like, no, just own it. This is you guys. This is who you elected. I mean, it's even more so you guys than it is anyone else, because this is who you chose. Also, it's pretty unbelievable. And then the last one is totally unrelated, but it's just the state of how they're still desperately hanging onto this narrative. Also, it's completely unrelated to everything else we've done so far, though. But this guy is trying to say, I've been researching and writing about hate movements for 40 years. Anti-Zionism is a classic hate movement. Like, this is, obviously, this is how they're trying to shut down speech in America also. I mean,
everything is anti-Zionism right now.
It's one of the most ridiculous things that we've seen unfold in America over the past few years, is how they've tried so hard to conflate that. And I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, that this is largely responsible for a rise in legitimate anti-Semitism also. That Israel is trying to, go ahead.
Israeli government is the largest source of anti-Zionism on this planet right now. I mean, like, by their own very action.
And full-on anti-Semitism also.
Yep.
Yeah, because they are trying to say that they are a representation of Jewish people, and you can't separate Jewish people from Zionism. Even the Jews in America who want to separate themselves from Zionism, they're saying, no, we speak for all Jews. And if somebody were to believe that, what's the natural result? And the natural result is, okay, well, you become anti-Semitic. And there are some people who are, and who are going mainstream also, who, when you listen to them, you're like, holy shit, these people are actually anti-Semitic. And that is a result of this attempt to conflate the two so seriously. But that is everything I have loaded up. If you have anything else to say, I'm going to look through the comments here. If there's anything you want to wrap up, anything you want to say to the audience while I'm looking through the comments.
No, I'm all good, because right now there's a big glare. There's a lot of natural sunlight filtering in, so I can't really see the screen really well. Okay. I think I'm good.
Yeah. It looks like we had a lot of interesting comments. We got to a few of them.
Yeah, let's just respond to some comments.
This is I don't see anything that we can really bring up. Some of them just kind of chiming in and things like that. But there's a lot of discussion going on amongst the people in the comments also. But that's good. No, good to see. It's very interactive. They're in the early stage. It looks like they dropped off. We had some people having a meltdown saying, "Oh, Carl, he's the worst. He's the worst." There's just one guy. There's this one troll.
You know what? I love people. I love people hate watching me. It help with my numbers, man. I mean, like, I love people hate watching me, because thank you for helping my YouTube analytics.
I feel bad. I should have interacted with him or brought some of his comments up, because he kind of gave up and left. It would have been nice for him to stay around, and we'll try to do that next time. But this is something we're talking about potentially doing. It might be hard to do it every week, but maybe every couple weeks or something like that. So if you're down for it too, we can, because it's fun too. It's fun, and it's we get to recap everything that happened over the last couple weeks. But and
we get to laugh at this ridiculousness.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin, for joining. Thanks everybody else for joining. We will wrap it up here, and hopefully in another couple of weeks we'll have another one for you. It was fun. Take care, everyone, and see you next time. Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Daniel.